All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Attentive SMS Plus Restaurants webinar. I'm Amir Zamanian, GM of the food, beverage, and restaurant vertical business here at Attentive, and I'll be moderating and participating in today's session. For those of you unfamiliar with Attentive, we're reinventing business consumer communication with our best-in-class SMS first platform. We're empowering brands to compliantly grow their SMS audience while leveraging behavioral data to send hyper-personalized messages throughout the life cycle. Globally, we work with over 5,000 brands, including major retailers like CB2 and Urban Outfitters, and restaurant brands, including Jack in the Box and TGI Fridays. Across the board, these clients are using SMS and conversational commerce to expand their brand reach, increase frequency and loyalty, seeing upwards of 20% of their digital sales attributed to the channel. Now, before we introduce our partners and panelists today, I want to take you guys through a few housekeeping items. Today's panel is being recorded. You'll get the email tomorrow, so don't worry about writing everything down. We want this to be interactive, so be sure to use the Q&A tab on the right and submit questions to our panelists. And to get the most out of today's event, stay tuned afterwards to join our interactive roundtables led by each company, where we'll actually dig deeper into today's topics, provide tips and strategies. Now let's get started with our incredible panel. Both Bounteous, Hathaway, and Radar are fantastic partners of Attentive, so we invited them to share their expertise and insights on multi-channel strategies, including SMS, specifically for restaurants. I'm thrilled to be joined by Ellen Green, VP of Growth Marketing at Bounteous Hathaway, and Nick Patrick, CEO and co-founder of Radar. Ellen, can you tell us a little about yourself and Bounteous Hathaway?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amir. And thanks so much for having me. So I'm Ellen Green. I'm the Vice President of Growth Marketing here at Bounteous plus Hathaway. I lead the loyalty and CRM practices, and we call that growth marketing because it's all about driving incremental growth for our clients. Hathaway was acquired by Bounteous last fall, but has been historic in the industry for delivering industry-leading digital experiences for some of the nation's top restaurant brands. And so our value proposition is really bringing together the holistic experience. So everything across mobile apps, websites, and CRM and loyalty to be able to maximize value for our clients, but also create these seamless experiences for our customers.
Thanks, Ellen. We're thrilled to have you here. Nick, the floor is yours. You can tell us a little about yourself and Radar.
Yeah, thanks, Amir. Great to be here. So my name is Nick Patrick. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Radar. We are the leading geofencing platform, and we power location-based experiences like arrival detection and order firing for curbside pickup, on-prem experiences, store locators for a number of great restaurant brands, including Panera, Pete's Coffee, CKE restaurants. We launched back in 2016. Founding team met at Foursquare, so we've been in and around the location space for a while. Since then, our tech has been installed on over 100 million devices, and we work with not just QSR brands, but also leading retail brands, real estate apps, travel apps, gaming apps, so on and so forth. You can find us on the web at radar.com.
That's great. I know there's a lot of similarities these days between retail and restaurants, some of the other verticals. I'm sure some of the folks on the call, not in the restaurant industry, will also get some benefits from this conversation as well. All right, well, let's kick things off. And without further ado, I want to start with our first question. So in today's world with changes to email and privacy, there's no better topic to start on than data, specifically first-party data. Nick, I want to start with you. How does first-party data and customer profiling help drive campaign personalization?
Yeah, sure. So, at Radar, and it's probably no surprise, we see first-party data as the future, especially when it comes to location data, which is particularly valuable, but also particularly sensitive from a privacy perspective. When we started the company back in 2016, the location space was filled with ad tech companies, or some of them call themselves location intelligence companies. And there was a lot of third-party data flying around. This was kind of back in the day when flashlight apps might collect your data 24/7 and sell it to a hedge fund. And a lot has changed since then. I think privacy has become much more important. And really, we set out pretty early on to build the privacy-first location platform. So I think when it comes to first-party data, major advantages. It's cleaner. It's sourced directly from end users, so you sort of can trust the accuracy and the quality of it. It's more privacy friendly. No question about where the data came from, whether end users provided consent, so on and so forth. Lots of different types of first-party data that can be used for personalization. So, preferences, demographics, behavioral data, purchase history. I think Amir and Ellen might talk about some of that. but of course, location data as well, which is what we think a lot about at Radar. Obviously, this data can enable all sorts of different types of personalization. We think a lot about right place, right time messaging at Radar. So, think about campaigns or messaging for in-store offers, offers when you're nearby the store, location-based messages during a pickup or delivery. And, ultimately done well, I think that means better user experiences, increased app engagement, increased spend, so on and so forth. I think biggest challenges that we think about with first-party data is getting users to opt in and getting to scale with that data. I think the solution there is get users to download your app, create value for them, be very clear about what data you're collecting and how you're going to use it to build trust. And ultimately, that's how you earn opt-in and power these great personalized experiences.
That's great. Thanks, Nick. I know something you and I talked about was kind of the concept of cleaner data, which I really like, especially when it comes to first party. Ellen, I know you live and breathe first party data. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I feel like we have the benefit of having some pretty rich first party data, considering that we do run loyalty programs and strategy for a lot of our clients. I know one of the things that we heavily lean into is the use of purchase data and using that to drive personalization and kind of getting into even things like microsegments based on different types of foods that people have tried. One of the things that I'm a huge fan of and always advocate from a client perspective implementing is a data capture strategy. And so one of the things that we work with clients early on in engagements to do is kind of map out that ideal customer experience and what that should look like, and essentially all the data that you're going to need to power that experience. Now, granted, that data strategy is going to evolve over time, but even when a new member is joining your loyalty program, there's going to be elements that you're not going to be able to get just from their transactional data, at least not right away. But a lot of our clients are looking for different ways to actually enhance their segmentation or use essentially some data capture elements to be able to do that. And so we're looking since the very start of the customer journey and what that looks like throughout the onboarding process, and start looking for ways to be able to enhance the data that our clients capture. So for instance, we have one client that in their onboarding series, they want to know who people are buying for, and are actually able to deliver a personalized offer based on what they choose in that communication. And then that also gets tagged on their profile for future segmentation. And so we found it extremely effective, to the point where, they're increasing a lot of their new member purchase rates by about 3x by being able to personalize that experience up front. And I think there's lots of ways to activate this. We can activate it in the email channel and the SMS channel, as well as throughout the digital experience. And so, making sure that you have the right technology to be able to power this is really important. And I think the last piece that we have a lot of conversations with clients about is about preference and preference centers specifically. And I think there's a lot of debate on whether or not to have preference centers and how important that is. And I think the biggest key there is making sure that if you are going to have one, that you're able to activate on it. And so I know some people like to ask about frequency, but then they want to send all the time. And so making sure that you're able to actually abide by those preferences and really listening to customers and activated that on key. So if you are going to have one, keep it simple and make sure that you are able to activate upon it.
Yeah, I really love that. I think a lot of times we kind of use the analogy of collecting first party data is kind of like dating, right? You don't want to ask for everything up front, but I really like kind of the concept of this progressive profiling. I think progressive profiling done right can do a lot of things for your brand. I think this also kind of falls into a lot of what we're seeing. I think at Attentive on the SMS side, we're ultimately seeing that the value of collecting phone numbers is just increasing as a first party data point. I think most consumers, as we know, have only one phone number, one device, and they rarely share it or change that phone number versus, 3 email addresses on average. And we also see a pretty wide adoption of SMS. So for these reasons, we've just seen the value of this first party data point be really huge. I think the other thing we're seeing is that a lot of our customers are using where all their traffic is going to capture first party opt-in. So a lot of our clients are using some sort of opt-in mechanism on their website, and they're collecting on average, I think 5% of their web traffic each month into a first party opt-in. I think the other things we see is that a lot of folks make the mistake of using preference collection as a one-time thing, right? I think preferences are great, but it needs to be routinely updated. So a lot of our clients are actually using two-way messaging, which is pretty unique inside of SMS to get these user-driven preferences. So this is something as simple as what's your favorite flavor, what's your preferred channel, some sort of gamification or brand marketing opportunities. But I think having a two-way conversation on text messaging helps you gather some of these data points to help personalize the journey. I think the other thing we're also seeing is the value of combining data points, right? So, one source of data should never be enough. I think for restaurants specifically, the best combination we're seeing is loyalty data, location data, and e-commerce data, all kind of mixed together to help you personalize these campaigns a little bit more and more. So I think we could probably spend a whole session on first-party data, but we've got to move up. So let's wrap up this first question this first question with a pro tip. All right, when it comes to leveraging first-party data, as we talked about, I think it's really important to enhance your marketing campaigns in terms of leveraging different types of data points to actually personalize the messages. So being able to collect browsing behavior, purchase behavior, location, and combining all this together ultimately helps you create a much more personalized experience. So the moral of this story is try to connect that first-party opt-in to some sort of behavioral data or transactional data and things like that. All right, now let's get into our second question. Now, we know for most businesses, especially restaurants, purchase frequency and lifetime value are really critical for long-term success. I know both Radar and Bounty's Hathaway are doing a lot of work in this topic. So, Ellen, why don't you kick us off and kind of talk to us about what you guys are doing in terms of increasing purchase frequency and lifetime value?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually done some research on high-value restaurant customer segments and kind of defined 6 different segments, but 2 of them are extremely motivated in 2 different ways. One of them is very value motivated. So things like discounts are very meaningful to them, where there's actually another segment that's really high value that has a lot of share within the restaurant industry that really cares more about recognition, community, and a lot of the social aspects. And so we find that if you're able to identify these different customer segments within your database, it actually drives a lot of incrementality. And so that you can actually focus your strategy and not give away discounts where you don't need to. The other thing that we believe is that loyalty is an outcome. And so it really is this whole notion of building a deeper relationship with the customer and the brand. And there's both transactional and emotional elements to that. And so a lot of what we're doing from a measurement standpoint is looking at not only driving, incremental transactions through frequency is one of those main areas, but also looking at it from an emotional standpoint, where a lot of the customer lifetime value elements play into that. And so, we're using loyalty to be able to understand customers, segment in a lot of the ways that I mentioned above, to really drive those incremental behaviors. So things like, new menu trial and purchase frequency and things like that. But we found that going beyond a lot of those transactional elements to be able to create emotional connections, there's some industry research out there that says 3 times higher customer lifetime value when you're able to create that emotional connection. And so, driving these emotional experiences and tying it back to the business objectives is where we're seeing a lot of brands succeed. And so we work with a lot of brands in the industry. One of them launched a product that customers were really asking for. And it's interesting because we've been working with this brand for a long time. And this product launch was unlike all of the others. It was something that customers asked for. They listened to them. They basically brought it to life based on their feedback. And it's this whole element of, asking and being able to act upon that to build the emotional connections. And I think it's pairing that with things like just the seamless experience of making it simple and easy to do business at all touch points, and even celebrating moments throughout their journey. So celebrating when they're trying a new flavor or celebrating their tenure, and really recognizing that within the brand. Some of our clients are doing it in fun ways, such as, reaching out to customers whenever they do their first weekend visit, and then all of a sudden they're a weekend warrior, or giving them a high five whenever they reach their 5th visit. And I think creating a lot of these magical moments is what's going to create the lasting effects that translate into frequency, but also customer lifetime value.
That's great. I mean, I completely agree. I think a few things that stood out to me, Ellen, is one, there's different motivators, right? Not everybody cares about a discount or a price. And kind of that emotional connection, I think, is really important. I think that goes back to, again, two-way messaging on SMS specifically can help you create that. Because, again, email, you typically don't respond, push, you don't respond, but text, you're used to responding and saying something back. So I think that helps create that personal connection. I think the other thing we're seeing is that, again, leveraging all this data helps you create smaller and more personalized segments, right? I think it's the age-old thing of, batch and blast is not going to work for you long term. So I think what we're working on the SMS front is really helping gather insights and feedback from the customer, and then using this to create connections. And I love what you said about kind of rewarding specific milestones, right? Whether, it's workout devices like the one I have behind me or something else, they're always telling you, hey, you finished your 10th workout, or this is your first time coming in. I think all these things kind of get you somewhat invested into the brand. And I think that's the difference between a loyalty program versus just increasing frequency, right? I think the other thing we're seeing is that campaign frequency is really important as well, right? I think you got to have the right mix of transactional and triggered messages, but also creating some sort of ongoing sequence of campaign messages promoting, to your point, new products, new channels and initiatives like an app promotion, new locations opening up, celebrity endorsements. There's a lot of ways to leverage kind of seasonal holidays and brand holidays to bring people back into your brand experience. Of course, the last thing we always suggest is doing a lot of testing, which I'm sure you guys work on as well, right? The discount rationale, the copy, image, no image, things like that. Nick, I know what you guys do on Radar definitely impacts customer frequency, especially when it comes to that last mile. Do you want to touch on this a little bit for us?
Sure. At Radar, we think a lot about the Amazon effect or the Uber effect. And, Ellen mentioned these magical experiences. We kind of take it for granted, but, we can order a package on Amazon. It shows up on our doorstep the next day. We can see exactly where it is in transit. We hail an Uber. We can type any address or place name on the map. It drops a pin. We can see the driver coming to us. We can see the ETA. So consumers have kind of come to expect these magical, seamless experiences, and that's true whether they're hailing an Uber or ordering something from Amazon, but also if they're placing a delivery order with a restaurant or pulling up to the drive-through or for a curbside pickup or whatever. Turns out this stuff is really hard to build, and actually pre-Radar, I was on the product team at an on-demand services startup here in New York. We wanted to build this really seamless, slick Uber style. See the ETA of your service provider, incorporate maps and location and all of these things. It's just really hard to do, and it's really hard to do well, especially when you have a small digital team or engineering team, or maybe don't have one at all. So, at Radar, we want to provide the infrastructure for our customers to build these types of, Amazon or Uber caliber, location-based operational experiences. And, I think how that ladders up to customer lifetime value is better experiences set you apart. Customers come back more often, they place more orders, their spend is higher, and ultimately that ladders up to higher lifetime value. So that's how we see all of that fitting together.
Yeah, I think this reminds me of that the anecdotal stat we all hear that it only takes one poor experience to drive a customer away forever, right? And I've seen, especially with the restaurant vertical, a lot of these last kind of delivery points being really crucial in terms of communication as well. Before we move on to the next topic, let's get to our second pro tip for today. And the pro tip is all about turning consumers into super fans. So again, we talked about frequency doesn't always require loyalty, but more of being able to promote things that actually bring person down into that brand experience. So using whatever channel you're using, but in this example, SMS, to promote location-specific offers. Maybe there's only certain things available in certain stores, limited time deals or promotions, app-only promotions that help drive downloads, or even invitations to join your loyalty program or other things. But ultimately, I think the goal here is to leverage channels to actually drive consumers into different parts of your brand and different ways to reactivate them time and time again. All right, moving on to our third question. And Nick, I want to start with you. When it comes to this omni-channel strategy and execution we talk about a lot, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you see?
Sure. I would say do think about location. I think folks tend to think a lot about different ordering channels, different devices, but I think it's also important to think about how customers are going to be engaging with you and your brand and your apps at different physical locations at different parts of the customer journey. So I think in order to deliver the most seamless omnichannel experiences, you want all of these experiences to be location aware. And I think most apps that you download, whether it's a QSR app or a retail app or a C-store app, don't understand where you are, right? They don't know if you're sitting at home on your couch or you're in the drive-through lane or you're in the store, right? So I think location awareness is really important. There are some powerful ways to incorporate location into these experiences that kind of go beyond what people typically think about when they think about geofencing. I think the sort of stereotypical geofencing use cases, background location, you have an app installed, it buzzes your phone with a coupon when you're nearby the store. And that's great. That can make sense. But I think there's potentially a lot more that you could be doing here. If you sort of envision more geofences than that, maybe we're zooming in and thinking about, the restaurant footprint, and there's micro geofences in the drive-through, in the curbside pickup area. Maybe you're even using, hardware like beacons to create these little sort of micro zones in store at the registers at different tables, whatever. If you zoom out a little bit, you can think about a geofence when you're nearby the store. Maybe you have a geofence for a delivery zone, maybe one for a particular postal code or state or country. So I think with a geofencing configuration like this, and location platform that supports geofencing across different devices, different ordering channels, that enables you to show the most relevant content, trigger workflows based on the user's location. So, do you think about location? I think at the end of the day, all this ladders up to really seamless, right place, right time experiences across every part of the customer journey, again, regardless of ordering channel or device or physical location.
Yeah, it's just incredible to see how far kind of location has come in terms of the marketing mix. I think we all started in marketing at one point. It was literally just give me an Excel file, all the zip codes, and maybe we just try to segment people based on where they're located. But I think using this kind of real-time device location data and kind of this given data, I think is really important. I also like kind of what you said about using geofencing to inform other channels, right? Whether it's push or SMS or email. I think at the end of the day, that geofence could be a trigger, and then the messaging channel can go back into preferred channels and things like that. Ellen, I'm sure this is right up your alley as well. What would you chime in on for the audience on this topic?
Yeah, so I think for me, like one of the big things is I know as marketers, we get really excited when we have a lot of channels and a lot of ways to communicate with customers. But I think one of the keys is like don't bombard customers with the same message in every channel. So just because you can communicate with customers in every channel doesn't mean you necessarily should. And so we do a lot of use case mapping with our clients to determine like what is the best channel for the message, or if there is overlap, like what that right timing and cadence is. One of the other things that I get asked a lot is because, the majority of our customers do have a mobile app, since that's one of the core pieces of our business and capabilities is designing apps and websites. We get a lot of questions around like push notifications and SMS. And so like, how do these strategies work together? If they have push notifications, do they need SMS as well? And we really advocate for a different strategy for both channels, and really putting the customer at their center and helping prioritize when there are overlapping messages on some of the elements that I mentioned before. Some of the other ways that we look at, activating SMS is I think that there's a lot that can be done with like SMS only offers where there is that exclusivity that you're giving customers something that they can't get in some of the other channels, and it really enhances the value prop of SMS as a whole. I think also the ability for two-way communication is huge. With push notifications, you're not able to get that feedback from customers and really, close that loop. And so I think that is a big differentiator from an SMS value proposition perspective, and a really good use case for a lot of our clients. And then the other one is really going back to what Nick was talking about and all of those different location-specific activations that you can do through SMS that make it incredibly powerful. And because it is so real time, as customers are seeing it immediately on their phone, which is really, really effective. And so, like, for one example is, we've done some research that says, customers make a decision on what they're going to eat about 30 minutes before. So a lot of times this is not well planned in advance. And so being able to understand that customer behavior better, and then being able to tailor that from a channel perspective. And so looking at channels like SMS is one that you can tailor it close to those timing of the eating occasions. Where something like email, people aren't checking their email box quite as frequently. And so really tailoring the strategy from a timing perspective in that way. And then the last piece is really around measurement. And I think measurement is really key to success. And so we put lots of plans in place to like test, learn, and iterate. Measurement is critical to any CRM program to make sure it's performing, working with clients to define like what those right KPIs and objectives are. So we actually have a whole measurement framework that we use that ladders up on 3 different levels. And really ties in not only the transactional, but a lot of the emotional components that I mentioned before from a measurement perspective, but also developing a solid test plan. So for a lot of these channels and really the customer experience as a whole, understanding not only what works in general for your audience, but also how it varies by different segments. And then being able to adapt that, based on the results that you're learning and continuously incorporating, those into your ongoing strategy. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients that I work with and they run all of these tests and they get these great learnings, but it's a matter of making sure that you're diligent and incorporating those into the ongoing strategy, which is one of the areas that we're assisting with to make sure that it is, driving better results over the long run.
Yeah. I think so. First of all, I agree. I think testing and iterating based on the result, I think are really key. I'm also kind of chuckling because to your point, like I order food a lot. I'll just be honest. And every time I get this delivery, I get a push notification, text message together every single time, every single step of the whole journey. And it's great. I never miss the food because I know when it's delivered, but it's also can be a little too much at some point, right? So I think it's really important to use some of the profile information, channel transaction information, things like that to kind of decide which channel to use. I think on our side, and you kind of alluded to this with the fact that people decide what they're going to eat 30 minutes before, I think context is really important when you actually think about which channel to use, right? So something more time sensitive like lunchtime or happy hour, you need something with a little bit more immediacy, right? And we know SMS has a less than 3-minute read rate. So for something more immediate, SMS could be key, right? And I think oftentimes we see that a lot of folks actually make the mistake of using something like SMS as a fallback channel versus actually taking advantage of the fact that it's got more immediacy and broader reach than other ones, right? I think the other thing we see is also the target audience and kind of what you're trying to convey to them. Again, SMS is a broader adoption. So if you want something quick and instant and something they can reply to, that might be the best channel, right? But if you have something that actually is a little bit bigger in terms of content where you need to have more room for copy, email might be key because, again, it might not be time sensitive, but it gives you a lot more for imagery, links, text, and things like that. And then something that maybe offers a lot of personalization, or maybe it's for your Power App users, a push notification could be key there as well, right? So I think you got to understand, like, who's the audience, what's the message type, how quickly do you actually want them to respond and take an action? And then obviously look at the opt-in status as well, right? If people aren't opted into your app, then that shouldn't be the only channel you communicate with them on. And I think we talk about, I think a lot of customers and marketers are using all their channels and connecting it, right? So I think the best experiences we're seeing is companies who kind of use this hub and spoke model. So they'll have a CDP or an internal data warehouse kind of sitting in the middle that combines all this data, enriches it, cleanses it, and then provides logic like, what's their last active channel, what's their opt-in status for different channels, and then they'll partner with best in breed vendors like us to actually basically execute that message and optimize it over time, right? I think the last thing we're also seeing that's really helpful is cross-promoting channels, right? We all know that consumers that are active on more than one channel ultimately have a higher lifetime value and better retention. So we've seen a lot of folks use SMS to promote an app download, use email to promote their app or SMS, use social to promote some sort of first-party opt-in. I don't think that these channels are ultimately competing, but they should also be working together to promote each other because, again, if I opt out of the app and you have email and you have SMS and vice versa and things like that. So I think we can, again, this is another topic we can talk about forever, but before we wrap it up, there is one more pro tip I want to get to. And that is, This pro tip is all about making phone numbers the center of your strategy. And we talked about the value of the phone number, but I think ultimately the big thing we're trying to call out here is there's a lot of different touch points you have with the consumer, whether they're in-store buying, whether they're online, whether they're on your social program, whether it's partners. There's numerous ways to actually drive online and offline customer-facing engagement to actually get that first-party opt-in. So whether you're putting a QR code on the receipt or the actual packaging, whether you're asking for an opt-in in the app or your social channel, we've seen best marketers using multiple different channels to get that first-party opt-in, and then using subsequent messaging to actually expand the data, expand the profile, and promote other channels as well.